my subject matter so much. I'm going to have a two-part presentation for you. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about the role of what today is called the hitchhiker effect in modern-day cryptozoology. Has anybody heard of the hitchhiker effect? Yeah. So you're going to wonder why a cryptozoologist like me is up here at a Bigfoot conference talking about UFOs, but you're going to have to bear with me for just a moment. So, who here has heard of Skinwalker Ranch? Everybody? That's good. So, how many of you are aware that world-class scientists that were assembled by Robert Bigelow initially, including Colm Kelleher, and quite a few others, were the chief scientists employed by the Pentagon's ATIP and OSAP UFO programs? Anybody? Okay, so those same scientists that were involved at Skinwalker Ranch were also involved with the Pentagon's current ongoing UFO disclosure program, their ongoing study known as ATIP and OSAP. Well, ATIP was designed in order to study actual UFO phenomenon. OSAP was designed to study the underlying paranormal aspects of that UFO phenomenon. In other words, the paranormal aspects were so predominant with the UFO phenomenon that they had to literally form a secondary group in order to just study those effects. So imagine that you're part of a top secret UFO study group at the Pentagon, and you're gone all day long studying this phenomenon, and you go home at night only to experience a wide array of other kinds of paranormal activity. Everything from poltergeist activity to black shadow entities walking across your house to materializing objects just materializing out of thin air, dematerializing, and culminating, I might add, in profound cryptid animal encounters. How do we explain that as cryptozoologists? That a side effect of what these people were studying at the Pentagon was interaction with cryptid animals. Now, all of this has been published by the chief scientists involved with all of this, Colm Kelleher and Dr. Gary Nolan and quite a few others that today are on nonstop podcasts talking about the hitchhiker effect. If you Google that, you're going to come up with a ton of interviews from these very scientists talking about it. But they even went on to make a profound statement saying that until they understand the underlying paranormal aspects of the UFO phenomenon, they will never be able to understand the phenomenon fully in and of itself. That interests me as a cryptozoologist because of a couple of profound cryptozoology encounters they had that they equate as being part of the overall hitchhiker effect that has to do with the UFO phenomenon. These are world-class scientists, best minds that we have on the planet. And they're the ones that are saying this. So imagine, and this is all a story, and it was published in the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which I highly recommend everybody read. It is a fascinating book, and it covers the hitchhiker effect and their discovery of it, etc. But imagine that you are the highest ranking CIA agent involved with all of this. You're on Skinwalker Ranch, and you live in Virginia. You're 1,000 miles from home. And you're with other intelligence agents on that ranch. And as a group, you all have a profound paranormal experience with what they described as a very malevolent, aggressive feeling entity of some kind that they couldn't see. Only to have your family 1,000 miles away simultaneously begin to experience a wide array of paranormal activity, including a dogman encounter. How do we explain that? You know, as a cryptozoologist, I have investigated quite a few dogman cases. A lot of them have been published. And I can tell you that there was physical trace evidence left at the scene. These are physical creatures, right? How do we explain the fact that the wife of the highest ranking intelligence agent involved with both the Skinwalker Ranch and the OSAP program had a dogman encounter on their property 1,000 miles away from where the husband was located? And he only goes by the code name Axelrod in the book because he's still such a high-ranking intelligence agent that they didn't and can't use his full name. So he goes by Jonathan Axelrod. How did Jonathan Axelrod's wife have this encounter? So she's on a Wednesday night, late at night, she goes to the kitchen sink to get a glass of water. Same night that her husband has this profound encounter at Skinwalker Ranch. And she looks out the window of the kitchen across their property, only to see an upright, bipedal, canine-headed creature standing next to a tree with its paws crossed, leaning against the tree like nothing's going on and staring at her. She thought she was losing her mind. She looked away, then looked back, it was still there. She didn't know what to do. She was in a state of pure shock, and she just went to bed. She didn't tell anybody, she didn't call her husband, she didn't wake up the kids, she didn't do anything. The following Saturday morning, the two kids, which are teenagers, saw movement at the window of the game room that they were in watching television. They look up to see the same creature staring in at them with a malevolent look on its face. It takes off, they run towards the window, they see this thing kicking up leaves as it's running. Another sign of the fact that this was a flesh and blood creature of some kind. Now, how many of you have seen or heard of the book Honk for the Skinwalker, which is what made Skinwalker Ranch famous? It was also written by Colm Kelleher, Dr. Colm Kelleher. Well, in that book, they also have another cryptid encounter. And this time it's with one of the scientists, and he's with one of the female intelligence agents that are on the ranch. And trust me, they're all the time. You don't see them on the TV show and all of that, but the government is extremely interested in what's happening in these areas. And Skinwalker Ranch is just one of these areas. It's just one of a lot of different areas that have these different vortex-like abilities, I guess you would say. They seem to have portals. They seem to be interdimensional. We don't really know. But my question to the Bigfoot community and to everybody else, and let me explain this first cryptid encounter. So they're walking towards one of the corrals, and they notice movement off in a field, and they have bright flashlights, and they're able to shine the light on what they described as being an animal that was part dinosaur, part beaver. They call it the dino beaver. Isn't that great? The dino beaver. Some of the most serious people you could ever imagine. They didn't know what else to call it. But my book, Paranormal Planet, that I wrote quite a few years ago, I posited that there were areas around the United States that have such high quartz crystal deposits that another mechanism known as the Woodward effect or the Mach effect could cause that quartz crystal to compress to such a degree that it became ionized, that once it becomes ionized, it emits electromagnetic fields. Those fields can be so strong that they literally tear or rip a hole in the electromagnetic membrane that separates this dimension from other dimensions, and it allows for temporary interaction to take place, and we describe that interaction as paranormal. And what you're seeing in areas like Skinwalker Ranch is exactly that. You have a vast amount of high strangeness, a vast amount of different kinds of paranormal activity, all taking place within a very small geographic area. How do we explain that? If it's not all emanating from a singular source, how do we explain it? And the more I study it and study the hitchhiker effect, the more I go back to the ancient teachings of the Greek, of ancient Greece and their genius loci, the idea that there are areas around the world that have a sort of entity or spirit residing in them that has an intelligence, because that's what it looks like. Something that can shapeshift, that can change its form into different types of paranormal phenomenon. And it literally feeds off of human interaction and emotion. It's just one theory. And all theories are equal until one is proven true. I have lots of theories. I come up with them all the time because we're grasping at straws. There are no experts. Somebody tells you they're an expert in cryptozoology or expert in paranormal studies, laugh, because there are no experts in those fields. We're all grasping at straws, attempting to utilize the scientific method when and where we can on a phenomenon that tends to resist the scientific method. So where does that lead as Bigfoot hunters? Where do we as cryptozoologists draw the line between what apparently is interaction with either an entity that can change form or with interdimensional beings of some kind? Where do we draw the line between that and the evidence showing us that these creatures are flesh and blood, living, tribal-like species in the wildernesses of the world? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. I spend most of my time these days contemplating that question and trying to develop new and modern paranormal theory to match being discovered by these scientists who are now more than happy to talk about all of their discoveries over the last couple of decades, and are doing so openly. They're telling all the secrets. So if you're missing out on that, you're really missing out. I would get online and look up the podcast with Dr. Gary Nolan and Colin Kelleher and Skinwalker Ranch and watch everything. Because these are the guys on the cutting edge of what we are trying to figure out. So I don't know where that leaves us. I can tell you, I had an experience with my old partner, J.C. Johnson, who's passed away, the late great J.C. Johnson, who's an amazing cryptozoologist. And we were in northern New Mexico, and we had some Navajo tribal members with us because we were on reservation land, and we were in an area that you could only get to on horseback, monster truck of some kind, and we were all on horseback. And we came across a field on the side of a mountain in the Chusca Mountains that had a 50-yard long disappearing track line. You could see where it came out of the wood line, 19-inch footprints. 19 inches. The average footprint that I've found are always right around 16. So you're talking about a huge animal. This thing comes out of the wood line and it starts walking, and it's got a 6-foot stride. Footprints are clearly delineated in the soil, which is sort of a soft, loamy, sandy-like soil, some scrub brush on it. And after about 50 yards, the prints just stop, right in the middle of this field. The topography didn't change, the soil didn't change, brush didn't change, nothing. There should have been another print, and another one after that, and another one after that, for at least another 50 yards till it hit the wood line again, and there wasn't. And JC looked down at the prints, and he just started shaking his head, and I looked up at the sky, and I just started shaking my head. Because you see halfway through the stride of this creature, the stride went from 6 feet to 10. That fast, in one step. That means this creature got scared, really scared, and it took off running. And you tell me what's going to scare a creature with a 19-inch footprint in the middle of nowhere in its prime habitat, an apex predator, probably 8 to 10 feet tall, who knows, 400 plus pounds. What's going to scare a creature like that? Because the only thing that occurred to me was that whatever it was had come from the sky. And as a paranormal investigator, I am more than aware of the human alien abduction phenomenon. And as it was mentioned earlier, a lot of the DNA that's been studied has come back that the mitochondrial keeps showing up modern human. We don't know why, but it does. So is it too far of a stretch to say that if humans were being abducted for their DNA, that these creatures who also possess a kind of mitochondrial human DNA might also be a part of the same genetic program? I don't know. But I know it had to be something really scary to scare a creature like that. And the underlying paranormal aspect of the Bigfoot phenomenon has been widely documented. I would be lying if I said I knew exactly what to make of it. Orbs turning into these creatures just disappearing into a flash of light. These are all things that have been reported. You look at the alien abduction phenomenon and you see abductees who have zero interest in the Bigfoot phenomenon reporting seeing a Bigfoot in the presence of the aliens who are taking them in these heavily wooded areas. It's all over the place when you examine that phenomenon, and you think to yourself as a cryptozoologist, what do you do with that? Because they are no less moved by their experience, say the average Bigfoot witness who has a Class A encounter, who then goes on to make profound life changes because of that encounter. That's how you know you always have a really good quality eyewitness who's told the truth, because they're right in the middle of making life changes that were a direct result of that encounter. Happens time and time again. If you're moved enough, you will make changes. So, as a Bigfoot hunter and as a cryptozoologist, which I've been doing this for over 25 years now, I'm the founder, by the way, of the Paranormal Intelligence Agency. You can find us all. The PIA has been around for a long time, and we publish scientific reports on the website. So you'll find us at paraintelagency.com. I was going to have that pulled up here for you. And I've published a book called Bigfoot Unleashed, detailing a lot of this information. So you can find that as well. Let's see what time check is. So for the part of my presentation, it was really just something fun and something kind of fast, which was, I thought it would be kind of cool if we as Oklahomans kind of went over a brief summary of the 5 civilized tribes' oral histories regarding these creatures, and then look at a Class A sighting report from each one of those areas where they have the histories. So I started off with the Cherokee, and the Cherokee have this creature that they, the pronunciation of the various Indian words I'm sure I will butcher since I don't speak the native tongue, but they call it the Tuli Kula, and the Cherokee call this the slant-eyed or sloping-eyed giant. This is part of their oral history. It's also known as the Cherokee Devil. The earliest form of this story was recorded by settlers in 1823, which I find really, really fascinating. And from Cherokee country, we have a Cherokee Native American elder in the area who witnessed on a clear summer's day from his front porch in a field across an old dirt road, a deer running at a very fast pace with a large, gray, seemingly bipedal creature in pursuit. The creature was chasing using both arm and legs in a loping movement. Both animals went out of sight, but then the witness heard the deer bleeding, then heard a thump, then everything went quiet. And in a lot of these reports in Oklahoma, there are quite a few reports where they are seen actively hunting. And I find that quite fascinating. When we look at the Chickasaw Nation, we have what are called the Lofa. And in the Chickasaw Nation, they have a story about a special clan within their tribe called the Wildcat Clan. And this oral history of the Wildcat Clan actually has the story of one of their great hunters, and the Wildcat Clan apparently were the best hunters. They were a nocturnal clan. I found that fascinating. When they're described as being nocturnal, and these were the Indians, not the Lofa. And Lofa literally means flayer or skinner, known for flaying or skinning its victims. And in the story of the Wildcat Clan, one of the hunters runs into one of these, and the creature can apparently speak. They ask him, "What are you doing here? You are intruding upon my land, and had better get up and return to your own place." The Indian believed himself to be strong enough for any situation, so he sat still without speaking. The Lofa ordered him off again and added, "If you do not get up and go away, I will tie you up and carry you to my place." "You may do so if you can," the man replied, and upon this the Lofa seized him. At first it seemed as if the man were the stronger of the two, and he was able to throw the Lofa down, but the latter smelled so bad that it was too much for his antagonist, and the Lofa overcame him, hung him up in a tree, and went away. That was recorded in 1926 by the Annual Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology. Now, the smell is reported in all of these oral histories, which is really fascinating to me. But this was on the Pontotoc River. this is the story of a little girl who had, she says, I had several Chihuahuas and a Rottweiler. Well, one day I was playing in the camper and the dogs were barking, running just a little ways from where I was. I decided to follow them. What came after was cute. It was a little fawn. I was going to chase it, but I saw this huge, smelly, 8-foot-tall, red mud clay-colored thing. As little as I was, I thought it was a tall man, until I hollered, "Hey, or who are you?" He looked at me and his face was so ugly and scary. I knew he wasn't a man. He stepped right over a 5'5" fence. The little fawn ran right under it. He didn't catch the fawn. I was in shock and I couldn't speak, so my dad told me to draw what I saw. He said it looked similar to a Sasquatch. That deer season, my dad was deer hunting. He had a deer right next to him. He was about to shoot him and he heard something coming toward him and the buck ran off. Dad stood up and yelled, "You scared my deer off of my land." He heard a high-pitched sound like a lion and a bull mixed together and heard branches breaking over his head. He ran to the house and got both of his brothers, who returned only to find nothing. So these are all in Oklahoma, guys. We have a ton of activity. The Creek or Muskogee Nation have what are called the Istichupco. And from that area of Oklahoma, we have a very, very interesting encounter that I'll share with you, and this will be one of the last ones for you. But this comes from a credentialed geologist. We don't get a lot of sighting reports from scientists, especially in Oklahoma, so I found this to be interesting. I and one other person were in the area measuring and sampling rocks exposed near Cane Creek. We are geologists. Throughout that morning, farmers have been hunting on their lands. As a result, we could hear sporadic gunfire all around us. After about 30 minutes to an hour, most of the gunfire had ceased. Sometime later, as I worked, I heard a rustling sound behind me. Believing it to be some kind of animal coming towards us, I turned my head to see behind me. Immediately, I observed something hanging from a low branch over the bridge on the opposite bank of the creek from me. The first feature I noticed was the unusually long arms of the thing. Secondly, I noticed that it was covered by reddish-brown long hair. The creature was hanging from the lower branch with its arms much like an orangutan does. In fact, the hair and the way it was hanging from the tree made me think of it as an orangutan. Also, for some reason, I seem to remember that the arms had less hair than the rest of the body. The entity that I saw was about 4 to 5 feet long, with about half of that being arms. The body was round and squat. I did not notice the legs or head of the thing. The window of observation was about 10 to 15 seconds, although I cannot be positive. Anyway, as soon as I noticed the thing, it dropped from the tree onto the ground. However, the presence of the bridge prevented me from seeing it hit the ground. But I do believe I heard further rustling sounds, although presence on the bridge prevented me from seeing it, although it's probably just my imagination. Afterwards, I asked my companion if he had seen or heard anything, although he indicated that he may have heard something. He said he did not see anything extraordinary. He also noticed, or stated that he's been in that area many times during subsequent visits. He had never seen or heard anything again. Again, in Oklahoma. Fascinating. The Seminole have a creature with a name that I won't even try to pronounce, but it means he who makes you forget. I find that fascinating because we have nonstop eyewitness encounter reports where they claim the creature was able to do something to their mind, was able to fog it, was able to make them feel disoriented, perhaps using infrasound to do so. And here is an oral history of a name literally means he who makes you forget. And least but not last is the Choctaw Nation. And we're in Choctaw country here. And to the Choctaw, they have a creature called Champ. Champ is a giant and is the ugliest form of Choctaw beast. It lives in the deepest part of the woods, so far in the forest that no Choctaw has ever been able to find the location of his huge dark cave. The Champ cannot stand the brightness of the sun or the open air. The smell of blood will attract him, and he will follow the person who has been hunting and carrying a wounded game. Champs do not have very good vision, but have a keen sense of smell. They can track any person or animal. They make a whistling noise as they stalk through the forest. His sense is so terrible that many people have died from the odor. While he looks like a gigantic form of Choctaw, he smells like a skunk. Some of them are really hairy like an ape, while others are hairless. The Choctaws won't live in an area where a Champ has lived or been spotted. The Choctaw will often be caught or chased by a Champ. If someone were to drop a small game such as a rabbit or a squirrel, the Champ stops to eat it and may be drawn off your trail by the blood of the small animal. And that's actually listed by them as a way to escape the creature. So, just a brief synopsis of all of the tribes, or the main 5 big tribes here in Oklahoma, their oral histories, and some actual field reports coming from those actual areas where those oral histories reside. So I just thought that was something that would be good for an Oklahoma Bigfoot convention, and I haven't seen anybody do that before. So, does anybody have any questions? Not a one? Probably confused. That's all right. Well, good. Yeah.
Do you think that the Champagne and Bigfoot are the same thing? Sometimes I've heard that it's described as looking just like a regular Choctaw, but just really big, and sometimes it's described as being more hairy, and it's also described as being, it seems almost violent, but the Bigfoot around here seem pretty tame.
Yeah, I think that, this is just another allusion to the idea that this is another tribe in the woods. That the indigenous people very much see them as just being another tribe. And I think that when they say, oh, it looks just like a large Choctaw, that's kind of what they're insinuating, is that these things aren't some animal of some kind, that they are in fact part human. So that's how I take it anyway. Yes, sir.
Most of the tribes actually have multiple names for them,
Right.
because I've also heard Choctaw called in Yachiko.
Yeah. Big black man.
I thought it was Chico.
Mm.
Then my grandfather, he passed away, and he had had a stroke, and he didn't learn English until he was about 6 years old.
Well,
And when he had the stroke, it reset the language center in his brain. It was about 6 weeks later he passed away. But he was calling it Chico.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, in fact, most tribes have 2 or 3 different names for the same creature. So, and it's interesting because in a lot of the descriptions, the creature seems to straddle the line between this realm and the next. Something which sort of parallels the paranormal aspects of the phenomenon as we're experiencing them today. So, anybody else? I think Robert Kreider's up next, and that's going to be a fantastic presentation. So I appreciate you guys tolerating me up here today, and thank you very much.